Well, I'm Caitlin Marlott, and I'm Executive Director of Vega Productions, which is the organization that created Instruments in the Cloud. Now, this is me at the beginning of I've played music nearly all my life. And this is me at the beginning at the Fairfield Fiddle Farm, wearing collars that would make the whole Del McCurry band very proud. And here's me about 3 decades later, give or take a few years, finishing up my first violin in a violin making apprenticeship that I did just down the street, actually, here in St. Paul. So music has been a very big part of my life, both in school and out of school. How many of you played music in school? I see a show of hands. All right. And what did you play? Trombone? Snare drum, excellent. Clarinet? Violin, oboe, and bassoon. All the well, they're all hard to master. So then you're all aware of, and who has children who played musical instruments in school? Okay, so everyone here is probably pretty aware of the benefits that music education affords a student in school and in life. And so you can imagine how heartbreaking it is to imagine, for the idea that's heartbreaking is that nearly 40% of Minnesota students K through 12 might not be able to afford to participate in music education. They just can't access it because it's too expensive. And why is it too expensive? Well, there have been decades and decades of budget cuts, which makes it harder and harder for each school to have the instruments on hand to just lend to a student. So that means that a student has to rent or purchase a musical instrument. Now, why 40%? Well, that's a really good question. Here in Minnesota, 38% of all students K through 12 qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so to put that into perspective, to make that more than just one little data point, to qualify for free and reduced lunch for a family of 4, that's about $44,000 of annual income. So you can imagine that if you're renting a trumpet or a trombone or a violin for 35 or 40 bucks a month, that's gonna be pretty hard to fit into a family budget. So the instruments are just not there to lend, and it makes it really hard for every student to access music education. So enter Vega Productions. So Vega Productions' mission, as you can see here, is to support quality music and art education in schools. Now, this organization was founded 10 years ago by a guy named Mark Gehring, a serial entrepreneur and social entrepreneur who's since moved on to start a record label called Groundwire Records, if you want to look it up. So he founded it 10 years ago, and through the 10 years, he's been fundraising. He and the board have been fundraising. They've raised $250,000 and have helped more than 30,000 students in Minnesota access music education in schools. And they've done that classroom by classroom. But what if we could do better? What if we could have a greater impact? So imagine with me, what if you had something in your closet or your attic that's been sitting idle for years that you could donate to help a student access music education? And what if your donation and the donation of others made it possible for all students to access music education, not just the ones who can afford it? Enter Instruments in the Cloud. Instruments in the Cloud makes it easy for anyone to donate a musical instrument directly to a school in need. Now, the whole point of Instruments in the Cloud is to get more musical instruments into the hands of more students and to help every person become a champion for music education in his or her community. We can make it easy on both fronts. So here's the way it works. Instruments in the Cloud for teachers is a free resource. Teachers log in and quickly create a wish list of instruments their students will need. And those wish lists roll up into a dynamic and searchable database of need, so that if I have a trombone to donate, or maybe not, but if I have a trombone to donate, I can search for a need for a trombone, and I can donate to a school who I know needs it, right? So here you can see some of the students who have benefited from receiving instruments through Instruments in the Cloud. Last year was our launch year. We facilitated the donation of 310 musical instruments in Minnesota. And we've worked from the very start with music teachers and administrators and with a software development company here actually in Minneapolis called Software for Good. And our team of innovators and builders has worked very well for us. This year, actually a couple of weeks ago, we incorporated a national list, the best national list of schools we could find, all 120,278 of them, into Instruments in the Cloud. So now it's technically possible for anyone, anywhere in the US, to donate a musical instrument directly to a school in his or her community, right? And it took us, well, it took about not quite 3 days to facilitate the first donation outside of Minnesota. And that's without any promotion. It was all organic. Someone found the site, made the donation, and made the donation online, and then took it offline and dropped it off at the school. So we know there's a need. There's a need in Minnesota, and there's a need in every other state in the US. So what we need now is your guidance and your support in figuring out how to scale Instruments in the Cloud in a smart way so that every student in every state can access and participate in music education, not just the ones who can afford it. Thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin. So maybe you could expand upon that so that we have a better idea of what you're looking for. And for the audience members, anyone that have questions, I'd like to bring you the microphone so we can capture the audio.
Great, thanks, Paul. Well, so I'd say that anyone who has any experience with scaling a product from local to statewide or statewide to regionally, please give me a call. I've got cards. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee, and or we could have one here, and talk about what you've learned. So that's guidance, right? For support, we're a nonprofit organization. We rely on people who are going to stand up for what they believe in and realize that music education is an important part of a whole curriculum. I mean, it's scientifically proven that instrumental music education supports language learning and reading, and it also has taught us, probably everyone in this room, collaboration, creative problem solving, and pattern recognition, which is probably stuff we use every day. We used it every day in school. We use it every day now. So those two things, I'd say.
How do the schools find you?
So the schools, so in Minnesota, we've emailed every music educator in the state, and we did that to launch the wish list feature, which we made available earlier this month. So that's how teachers are finding us. Through the past 10 years, we've worked with a number of teachers throughout the state, so we have the advantage of teachers already knowing about us too. So we already have a list as well. We also acquired a list, and we've communicated in several ways.
And then they upload what instruments they need?
Yes, yes.
I'm just wondering, is there a typical demographic of the donor? Is it a grandparent who kids have moved away and this is in his attic, or is it the grandson who's no longer playing the instrument and is now 50 years old?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So we polled our donors. We had 310 instruments, I said, had been donated through Instruments in the Cloud in the first year. So that meant we had just shy of 300 instrument donors. So some people donated more than one instrument. So when we polled those donors, we had a great response rate. People were happy to tell us more about who they were and what their motivations were. And some had an altruistic motivation. They knew that music education in schools needed their support. And then also for some people, it was moving day, right? It was spring cleaning, and that was a motivating factor as well. So, so what we know demographics-wise, to answer your question, is that the typical donor is between 45 and 75, right? And as far as life stage, we asked people, and they said, well, you know, new empty nester, or semi-retired, or retired, or very happily retired. So it was an open form question, which was great to get people's input on that. So I gather that it's a lot of people who are moving, who are maybe downsizing. And if you think of the boomer generation, the leading edge of the boomer generation, which is the older part, you know, they may still have those instruments, but they're making those donations. The trailing edge, the younger side, you know, they're just considering where they want to move next, possibly, if they're making that move, and that's an opportunity for us.
I've got a fistful of kids, and we've gone through a fistful of instruments, and the challenge that we run into when we're getting into the new instrument is that you buy an oboe or a trumpet or whatever, and you bring it home, and it doesn't work properly, and you take it to ABC Music Store to get it fixed, and find out with an oboe that it's going to cost $300 to get it fixed. With a clarinet, it's going to cost $100. When you have somebody donate, unless it's a trombone, which is either in the box or it's not, there aren't any parts to break.
Right.
There's stuff that needs to be looked after. How do you deal with that? If I'm going to donate a trumpet, but it's going to cost $150 to get the trumpet fixed by the guy who's going to fix it, and you can buy one on eBay for $30, where's the advantage of paying the guy $150? Do you have that guy lined up? And the other thing that drives me crazy about music school programs is when you say, strings, do you do guitar? They all say, no, we don't do guitar. Everybody in the music education business knows that guitar is an instrument kids would love to play at school, and school just says, no, we don't do that. We do violins and clarinets. Figure out a way to tie guitars into it, because people will learn that off of YouTube on their own.
Absolutely, and people are, so to speak to the guitar point that you made, schools are incorporating guitars and world drumming and other things that are different from traditional band and orchestra into their programs. And actually, Robin Lorenzen, who manages the music programs in St. Paul for St. Paul Public Schools, is here. Do you want to speak to that? Okay.
Well, we've been working with Vega Productions and the Instruments in the Cloud for probably 6 years now. And so we've been kind of working side by side to explain to them what our needs are and how they can help support us. We have, as you know, a very diverse population and a lot of free and reduced lunch students in our schools. So we have also incorporated an after-school instrumental music program for our elementary students, which means that we provide all the instruments. And we provide all the repairs, and we provide all of the method books and reeds and oils and all of that. So one thing that Instrument in the Cloud has done is they've allowed us to help to put the instruments in the hands of those students. And then also what's more recently happened in the last couple of years is they don't just give us the instruments, they make sure they're clean and in good repair, and really taking that into consideration, that we don't just have a broken instrument in our shelves. And then to speak to your question about the guitars, and we do have a lot of schools in our district, secondary schools primarily, that are teaching guitar and keyboard piano. And then also we have 3 schools that are doing electronic music, like music production and using Pro Tools, GarageBand, that type of thing with composition. We really work hard to have the students access and have experiences around all the state standards, which include composition and improvisation and reflecting and critiquing, and not just the performance and the general knowledge around music.
Yeah, music education has changed so much from when I was in school, wearing those amazing collars. So, thanks, Robin. One other thing I'd like to point out, to scale from Vega Productions, we make donations to schools, and we help create new classrooms of music. Of course, when someone's donating in California to a school in California, we don't have as much say over the condition of the instrument. So when we communicate with each donor, when they've logged their donation, on the form we ask what condition the instrument is in, and if it's in good or fair or poor condition, we suggest that they take it to an instrument repair shop and have those repairs taken care of, because it's not enough to just donate a musical instrument. It's really important that instrument be playable. So that's our first step in addressing that issue. And the second way that we can, well, I'll just leave it at instrument repair is probably the next barrier to quality music education that we really need to address. So after we can get playable instruments into the hands of students, we want to make sure they continue to be playable. So.
Have you done any marketing towards the college campuses at all? Because I know that, speaking from experience, both me and my sister hawked our instruments for beer money in college, and it seems to me like that would be a large demographic, because anyone with an instrument at that point in time isn't probably going to be pursuing their musical career, and are probably in a need for some sort of financial gain.
That's a great idea. Thank you. We haven't yet, but we'll look into that. Thanks. Right. That would be excellent. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris. I might bring an interesting perspective to this meeting. I'm a record producer who's worked with 24 Grammy winners. I also have an online business called Dr. Pro Tools. I teach privately. I know many of the people in the college community. McNally Smith, Tom Tucker Sr., who founded IPR, was a good friend and mentor, and Paul Peterson and MMI. So at the college level of music education, I know this. I've also been a stepfather of daughters with instruments. I remember trying to do something with the clarinet. We went through the mortgage crisis. We were like, what do we got in the house that we can do something with? Mm-hmm. And the gentleman made a really key point. The instrument's really worth nothing unless it's repaired. Mm-hmm. And I think, a key barrier anytime, regardless of whether you're doing something with social media or the cloud, is did you solve the problem? Mm-hmm. And I think in the problem analysis, you just said the biggest barrier you have is instrument repair. And so I believe you need to have a network of music repair shops. One of my artists that I work with, Amy Tobin, managed Fine Violins on Grand Avenue. She's no longer there, but for years, that's an excellent shop. Leonard Shapiro does guitar repair in Minneapolis, actually right on the St. Paul border over here by Cretin. These people are excellent folks. They're masters at their craft, but they don't have the marketing skills to bring in the repair work. It would be a wonderful strategic partnership for you to get with repair shops nationwide, especially the one-man band kind of repair shops, the single luthiers, the single instrument repair and violin repair shops, because they're a dying breed. And that, I think, if you're turning over an instrument, as the gentleman says, if it's not playable and if the parent has to invest hundreds of dollars, I'm sure these instruments go to children most in need, regardless of what it is, and absolutely guitars. I mean, I've done market research for my Pro Tools teaching and support business. There are 85 million musicians in the United States. That's a lot of.
It's a great number, isn't it? Yeah. 85 million musicians.
And not all of them have the time anymore. Many are I'm from the boomer generation. I turned 60 this year. But I've gone through a lot of instruments. I also was a manager of Guitar Center here in Roseville. So I really have a lot of background on what you're doing, and the repair piece and the social media piece are huge. It's not so much about the technology behind what you're doing. It's really making it almost into a Facebook for musicians kind of website. I think if you do that, and if you network with repair shops, then you've really got something. You need to remove that barrier. It's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the biggest barrier is having the musical instruments in hand, right? And then the one right behind that is making sure they're playable and they continue to be playable. So imagine a network of musical instrument repair technicians who each shop and each person has peak times and low times or slow times, right? So what if we were to optimize that, right? What if we had a retired band director who was, loved to recork flutes and clarinets and realign them, right? And he could just do that, right? And he would be happy. Well, it's hard to connect that retired band director with the person or the school that needs it. So if we can make that connection, I think that's probably next for instruments in the cloud. But we should talk more because I'd love to. Okay. Wonderful. Excellent. Great. Let's talk soon. Definitely. Thank you.
I'm just curious if you could go over the donation process and explain my experience with donating, whether it's time, money, or products of any kind. The more seamless the donation process is, the better the result. What does your process look like?
Great question. So when a donor goes to the site, I'm just going to back up here. So a donor would click on Donate Instruments. That would take the donor to, yes? Oh, this is instrumentsinthecloud.org. And I'll hand out some cards at the end here. So go to instrumentsinthecloud.org, click on Donate Instruments. From there, you have two options. You can donate to a specific school. So let's say you have a school down the street that you know has a band program, and that was your kid's band teacher, and you want to support that school. Definitely, you can do that. You click on Donate specific to a specific school, and you fill out a little bit of information about yourself, a little bit of information about the instrument. You click, yes, I would like a donation acknowledgement, and then you click Submit. From there, you get an email in your inbox that says, here is the link to your donation acknowledgement, and here is some information about where to drop off the instrument. Because that's something that trips people up. They're like, should I go into a school because there's security, and how do I navigate this? So you have that email, and then a person also follows up with you within maybe 48 hours and says, thanks again for your donation. Let me know if you have any questions. I see that you've marked the instrument as in excellent condition. That's wonderful. Or I see that you've marked the instrument as in good, fair, or poor condition. It would be great if you'd consider taking it to an instrument repair shop to get it tuned up before you drop it off, because having a playable instrument is everything. So that's the second email from the human, which at this point is definitely necessary. I don't know that there's going to be a point when it's not necessary. I think thanking people for what they're doing is really important, and making sure to answer their questions is also important, right? So then that's the online process. Then from there, the donor takes the instrument and drops it off at the school. So one other thing, so with the wish list feature, you can say, find a need for my instrument. So let's say the trombone, which I hope you're still playing. I'm not encouraging you to give it up. But so I've got this trombone. I need to find a place for it. I'm going to go find a need for it. I search for a trombone within 5, 10, 15, 100 miles of my house. So there's geolocation that works on this site. And it shows all the schools near me, all the school music programs that need that instrument, that trombone. So then I choose one, and then I go to the part where I fill in the information about myself and the instrument. So does that answer your question? Okay. And they could certainly do that. That's an option too. Yeah. that would be a really neat thing, especially as we scale nationally. Thank you for that idea. Thanks.
Excuse me a second. We just have time for one more question, and maybe you can carry on a conversation there afterwards.
So one quick question. Do these instruments then become the property of the school? Is that the idea?
Yes, they do. So the school then owns them, and they're used year after year by students.
And how successful have you been at raising grant money to support this initiative?
The grant money is the main way that we have funded the development of this, other than the pro bono investment from Software for Good. So last year we were supported by last year and the year before we were supported by Minnesota Philanthropy Partners, and that's St. Paul Foundation, Mardag Foundation, and the F.R. Bigelow Foundation.
Okay.
We've also received support from the Shavlik Family Foundation, which is a foundation that's focused on using technology for good.
Okay. And then lastly, I did a quick Google on how do I donate an instrument. You guys were not #1. So I would just recommend, again, doing some search engine optimization or add some content to your site so you become the destination.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin. Let's have another round of applause for Caitlin.
Thank you, everybody.